Okay. So, hello to everyone watching. My name is Rachel Wydra. I am a second year law student at the University of Minnesota. I also play the bassoon. I've been playing for about 13 years now, all the way through middle school and high school. And then I studied with Dr. Kristen Schillinger at Miami University in Ohio. And I'm here with Patty Zurlo. Um, Patty, if you could just briefly introduce yourself, you know, your bassoon and educational path, your career, when did you start? Where did you study? Tell us maybe a little about your family or your home life.
Sure. Um, so nice to be with you here and to meet you, Rachel, this way. Um, I started bassoon in sixth grade school music in Milwaukee, a suburb in Bayside, Wisconsin, which is a suburb of Milwaukee. And my first main teacher way back then was Steve Basson, believe it or not, Basson, if people are familiar with him, but that's really his name. He has a brother who's a cellist too. But Steve was principal in Milwaukee Symphony. And I just right away in sixth grade, when the band director came around and said, do you want to play an instrument? And I said, yeah, I want to play oboe. And they said, well, we already have a school oboe. You want to play bassoon? And I said, what's that? I mean, it was kind of like that. And I just took to it right away. And if I didn't play bassoon, I'd probably play cello. So it's the voice that's the most appealing to me, that the range and so on. And I studied with him all through high school, and then graduated a year early, and went to Indiana. And my second main and probably the primary bassoon influence on me was Leonard Sharrow, who played with Toscanini in New York and Fritz Reiner in Chicago. And he was a character and kind of like a second dad, and an incredible bassoonist. So, I just, after I graduated, did all the, did auditions, had day jobs, freelance, moved back to Milwaukee, bounced around, uh, played in the American Wind Symphony, which is on tour, for a year and that was kind of wild. We went to the Caribbean.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, and we made like $300, I want to say a month or something, but you couldn't even spend it because you worked all the time.
Oh my
You were
gosh.
either working or traveling. It was I don't know if they could get away with it now, but so I ended up moving to the Twin Cities to play with a woodwind quintet that was started by some colleagues from Indiana. I was at the time, I was in Pittsburgh. I had started a master's at Carnegie Mellon because Mr. Sharrow had moved to Pittsburgh Symphony at that point. And I didn't like it there. I loved Mr. Sharrow, but I knew it. I just didn't want to stay. And John Miller, it was principal bassoon of Minorca at that time. And he'd been kind of a legend while I was growing up in Milwaukee. So I thought, okay, I went and sort of started a freelance life here and teaching, and played many auditions, and even did very well, runner up in half a dozen. But as we all know about orchestra jobs, um, runner up, you might as well be last. And by the way, that was your last $400 that you spent getting there. So um, long story short, I mean, and I was teaching at the Arts High School and freelancing in Rochester Symphony and extra with the orchestras, all that business, and kind of putting it all together. And I had two kids in my 30s, and um, ended up, I mean, this is the true story. Ended up getting a divorce, and I married a bassoonist, by the way,
Oh,
which
wow.
was, which was fun. Um, but, uh, and just, it just never felt like enough playing the bassoon. I mean, part of it was, um, I was always writing the grants or producing the concerts or doing the marketing. It was like it wasn't enough just to play. I was always looking for more, though I loved playing. And then I just wondered, how I was going to get a babysitter for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And how was I going to make this happen? And no longer was I willing to move to Memphis for $14,000 a year to play second bassoon. You know what I mean? And I played, the last audition I played for an orchestra was here in Minnesota. It was second bassoon, and I did really well. And, got advanced. And then they hired the person who'd been playing there for a year, and which is not unusual, or, but it was like a threshold for me. Like I just went, this is like a bad boyfriend. I no, no more. And my dad was a lawyer, and in Milwaukee, and I had worked in his office and in high school and liked it. And it made sense to me. It was familiar. And so I thought, well, I'll take the LSAT. Let's see what that's like. Well, I did that. Okay, well, I'll apply. It was decent, I'll apply to schools. Okay. And it was just incremental. And I thought when I wrote my application that I would work for an orchestra. I would do arts, like I thought maybe I would do arts administration or orchestra administration, but there were no really graduate programs at that time here. There was one at St. Mary's, and I just thought, because being raised by a lawyer, I thought it was a good education for any field. Good.
Yeah.
And so I decided to do it. And, interestingly enough, every once in a while I'll do an arts administration job, but I've been given the feedback that people have a perception of lawyers that isn't accurate. I was told by someone in an orchestra administrator that he would have preferred that I started as coffee girl and moved up instead of applying for the, like a mid-level position. And I went, well, I was coffee girl, just not here. This
Yeah.
and I was in my early 40s, so I was a professional musician until my early 40s. And somehow I was seen as an outsider all of a sudden. It's very interesting, the classical music world, how kind of closed-minded it is. It's changing now because it's had to, but so also, I mean, before there was one lawyer in town who is now retired, who had what he called an art law practice. And I met him, and he ended up kind of mentoring me. I did a clerkship for a year before that. And what happened was, before I even had letterhead, people I knew, were calling me and saying, can you look at this contract? And of course, as you know, when you first graduate from law school, you don't really know, theoretically what you're supposed to do, but it's not like, exactly what needs to be in a contract and stuff. But the point being, there was always this, I didn't even have business cards, and there was this trickle. I could tell there was a need, that people needed someone like me who could be an artist and who could also read hard paperwork and understand it, and kind of, I could see both sides. I could understand how someone could spend all day in a room painting and not make much money. Whereas when the feedback I got was, if you went to a traditional setting of a law firm, they didn't feel as at home. I totally get it. I still am an artist. I identify mostly as an artist. And so it just kind of grew from there. It's never been a high revenue practice, but I really like it. And I've found this kind of odd little niche. Current times are interesting, and everybody may be pivoting a bit in the future, but uh, it's been good. So wow, that was kind of a quite a. I went down quite a road
No,
there.
that's great. It's really great to hear about your journey. It's definitely like a super unique journey. Yeah, that's great. And for anyone listening who doesn't know, the Twin Cities are a very big art hub. There's tons of theaters and orchestras and art, just lots of things going on. So
There's actually,
definitely.
we have more seats per capita in theaters than we're second only to New York and maybe LA. The other thing that I love to boast about Minnesota, and although my children tell me I'll never really be a Minnesotan because I wasn't born here,
Oh,
and it's kind of true, honestly, um, is that we have what we call the Legacy Fund for short. It's called the Clean Water, Air, and Legacy Act, and it it was an amendment to our Constitution that provides a percentage, a fraction of a percentage of sales tax to both environmental and hunting groups, kind of lobby groups have organized that, and then the arts. So
oh
we have
wow.
built into our, yes,
I didn't
oh,
know that.
Rachel, oh, it's amazing. So we have a state arts board that's flush. We have organizations that could never exist if it weren't for this um, institutionalized stream of income. I mean, it's not like anybody's getting rich in the arts, but it can be the difference between failure and not. Now, interestingly, this year the State Arts Board just sent out a letter telling everybody they're ceasing all funding and they're just holding on to their money to see what happens um, from the fallout from
Yeah.
COVID, because artists, it's crazy. Like, not just artists, but arts presenting organizations, venues.
Yeah, I have
It's
a very close family friend who's a photographer and he has just lost all of his gigs.
right.
It's a very difficult time to be an
Yes.
artist.
Yes. So the State Arts Board sees their role as holding on, they're going to provide relief. And we also, in this state, we have regional arts councils and they get funded also by the State Arts Board and other organizations. But yes, Minnesota is a really, really good place for the arts, except it's cold and dry, so it's hard to make reeds.
Yeah, I haven't been playing bassoon as much in law school, but the reeds not great. Although
Yeah.
I mean, we're from the Midwest, so we're a little used to
Yeah,
it.
it's not too bad, but
At least it doesn't change as much.
no, no, it's true. Like Chicago,
Yeah,
yeah.
like
The
Chicago.
lake effect, yeah,
Yes.
and the wind.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I was looking on your LinkedIn and your website a little and saw that you've like taught some law school courses and arts management courses and that you also do mentoring to artists, and I'd love to hear more about all of those.
Well, thanks. Well, the first class I taught after being a lawyer was, I think, what was it called? Legal issues. Uh, what was it? Oh dear, I can't remember the name of it.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. That it's legal issues in the arts kind of thing,
Okay.
and believe it or not, there's a case book and everything that I used, and it had to do with the case law, and that's going to be intellectual property, contracts, nonprofit law to a certain extent. It's going to be estate law, believe it or not, and a little bit
Oh,
of tax law because artists die and their families have stuff or families own it. And there was also there was a lot to do with World War II because Hitler stole a bunch of art from a lot of people, and so there's repatriation issues. So that was really interesting. And then I taught at St. Mary's and have taught at the U. In the University now has of Minnesota now has in their continuing ed. Is that not continuing ed? What's it called? Maybe it's called continuing ed. Arts and cultural management
okay.
program. It's basically a master's I'm not sure, in the business school maybe, and then with an emphasis on arts and cultural management. And similar issues. What does it mean to be a nonprofit, which is huge? There's a lot of regulation with that. What are your obligations? How is it different? I mean, a lot of artists think they're a nonprofit because they don't make much money, but the definition of a nonprofit is actually a legally operative term that has
Yeah.
consequences and significance. And in terms of mentoring artists, like a lot of what happens is, and I will not stereotype this because many artists are quite sophisticated in a business level, and many aren't. And I've had people, well, since COVID, I've gotten several calls, Zoom meetings with people who are like, what do we do now? We're thinking of changing from a for-profit organization to a nonprofit so we can take donations. We're thinking of going online with our programs. Who owns the intellectual property at that point? How do I protect what I have? The issues have changed a little bit with this. So I consider that mentoring. Or I feel like artists are often so grateful for anything that they need to be, or they often, I feel called to, it shouldn't be about them, to encourage them to speak up, to say, yeah, it's okay to ask for something in a contract that's not in there. If somebody hands you a contract, well, I don't want to rock the boat. I'm just so lucky to have any work at all. Well, wait a minute. Yes, you are. And, maybe you won't get what you want, but you get to ask. And often you do, because contracts are just are things they've cut and pasted over the years, and nobody even looks at it. They just say, oh yeah, we're commissioning that guy to do this. Give him that contract we used with so-and-so. And you find out, it's empowering. I like artists to feel like they're part of the economy, and what they contribute is real, and it's not just kindergarten art or whatever. So that's a big piece of it. And then there's everything from that to helping strategically plan how to go forward with their business, how to form an entity, how to either protect or not infringe on others' intellectual property. So that's a big piece of it. And I work with another Minnesota brag. Everyone's going to move here now. We have an organization here called Springboard for the Arts.
Okay.
And they are like an arts consulting nonprofit. They've grown immensely over the last, say, decade. I used to office with them, and I was on their I'm one of the founding lawyers in Minnesota Lawyers for the Arts.
Oh, wow.
And we do educational programs and pop-up clinics. And I'm currently super interested in increasing services. My dream would be for artists to know that they could call a number, speak to a licensed attorney who knows their industry, and say, this and this happened. Is this a legal issue? Is it not a legal issue? Can I do it? Whereas now you can do that, but you go through a process of, then you get a volunteer lawyer, and I feel like everyone should get the same kind of help you would if you owned a Kinko's and you had kind of like a law firm that was on retainer. So I'm working, that's my little secret dream, and hopefully, not so secret anymore, I guess, if I'm telling you, but
Yeah.
a legacy, something to leave going forward.
Yeah, that would be so great. I think just the problem generally in the legal field is accessibility of services. I do an immigration law clinic, and it's just so hard to get an attorney on the phone and talk through those issues.
Right. And to have someone who is devoted to that, you know,
Mhm.
like devoted meaning sitting there. Like that's what I do. That's what somebody does is, you know, and it's not a program officer who can be helpful and who can vet some things. But, you know, as you know from your legal training, there is something about going through that and having a license and keeping up on things that it's, it's got more substance. The advice and your instincts would have more substance. So, yeah, that's what I would love to do, and I'd love to lead the country. Other states, other markets, you know, big cities have volunteer lawyers for the arts. New York being the biggest one, and they're not really connected except sort of in a friendly way. And you know, they meet,
Yeah.
you know, um, and I think about half of them have attorneys as their either ED or main person, but you know, I think Minnesota could be leader of the pack
Yeah, for
with
sure.
our resources. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That would be great to see. Yeah,
Mhm.
maybe we
Yeah,
want everyone to move to Minnesota.
I know, and it's getting warmer. So there you go.
Yeah, it's
It's not as cold as it used to be in the winter.
so shifting a little to
Uh-huh.
I guess question more about bassoon. So do you still play bassoon? How much do you practice? How have you balanced like being an artist and being a lawyer?
That's super great question, and it's super challenging. I mean, the thing about bassoon too is, as we all know, it's kind of an ensemble instrument. Not that it's not beautiful by itself, but the repertoire lends itself to that. And uh, well, I'll tell you, in law school, though, you know, I was single parenting two daughters, and I had a dog and a house and stuff, and I just thought I'd keep up jobbing. And I was playing an opera, and the first year of law school is, especially for a conservatory trained human, it was the first time I'd seen a blue book, honestly, was law school. I'd never,
Same.
yeah, it was, you know, you get tested for a whole, they drown you in reading. It's sort of like, it just teaches you to be able to read really hard stuff fast and get the point, you know. Um, and I played a gig and it was over. It was some opera that was like a new composition. So wasn't like going and playing Tosca or something where you know the tunes. And it was over and it was like 11:30 at night. And I could not figure out how to get home. I was so tired that
Oh,
it freaked me out. I called a friend, this friend who I was talking to you about earlier,
yeah.
and I said, "This is where I am. Can you?" It was before Google Maps. So this must have been around 2000 or 1999 or something, the last century, you guys.
Before Uber,
Yeah, and
before
you
the
know,
light rail too, right?
oh yeah, before, yes, before. I mean, I imagine my cell phone that I had was like, you know, like a big sat phone, you know. It was, I mean, I'm amazed I even had one. um so she got me to the highway and I got home and I just started realizing I don't know if I can do this anymore. You know, this is and so I pretty much stopped. I stayed in the union and I would play things every once in a while, but rarely. And what happens is, you know, you're the contractor, you turn something down once, and I don't know, other people, I've seen other people do it, go to grad school and keep it up. But I also had, like I say, I had kids.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And so often, and you know, now I'm not even in the union though. I think about applying all the time or rejoining. Um, but I'll get, for a year I played over at McAllister. I lived near McAllister College,
Okay.
and they needed a ringer in for an orchestra, well, a conducting student, you know, and I played for a year there. Or um, you know, for a while I kept it up trying to do recitals or be on somebody else's recitals. But it was just super hard and not motivating, though. I have my bassoon, I have my Heckle 12,913 that, you know, like, and I can't imagine selling it. And it just, I want to say this fall, I had it put the pads redone and took it to my old repair person because I could. So, I take it out every once in a while and I, box cello suites and
Yep.
some, Raffaci studies and some like Cesson and I think it was about a year ago, the Berlin Philharmonic did this thing. A friend of mine in New York sent me a link where they invited amateurs to audition to play with them.
Oh my God.
And so and I found out about it like 4 days before. I just started practice, and you never forget Mozart Bassoon Concerto.
No.
Because that's all there is in life and so that was still in my brain. And I just practiced like crazy. And everyone's got an iPhone. And I was telling everyone I was auditioning for Berlin Phil. And people were looking at me like, what? Like, and I got runner up. And I haven't seen if they're ever going to do that again. But I thought, what a great idea, because
Amazing.
they got people from all over the world. And you just uploaded a video. And when I might even still have it on my phone. And I listened to it and went, this doesn't suck. And that felt like an accomplishment, sometimes I think about professional tennis players, what it must be like for them, or basketball, when you used to be like at the top of your field and in such good shape. And then now you really can't play that way,
Yeah.
But I'm always looking for opportunities. I find other bassoon players to play duets with. One of my another oldest and dearest friend is Steve Dibner, if people know him. He's associate principal in San Francisco. We were at Indiana together. And every time we visit each other, we play duets. And, though he's getting close to retiring himself. But so, yeah, that's how if you could think of a way. The other thing too is I realized that I didn't want to, like people say there are civic orchestras and maybe there are some I would play with, but like the big Minneapolis Civic and stuff, that's like a real commitment. That's every week. I just wasn't sure I could make a commitment like that at this point, or a few years ago.
Yeah.
So, but you don't lose it. I gotta say, it's like riding a bike in a way. I think so. We can all play. Are you there, Rachel? Looks like you froze.
Yeah. I think you're freezing up a little.
Yeah, you were freezing for a minute. Now it's stopped.
Okay. I think it
Good.
might be better. There we go.
Yay! Yay! Yeah.
The life of being on Zoom.
Yeah. Well, and now that I know you're going to that you're in Minneapolis,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I love looking for opportunities to play my bassoon.
Where do you get to play? What do you get to do?
Yeah, so I play at my church at holidays, which I've been doing all through college. Over Christmas break, I played at my high school teacher has a little orchestra. So I played with that, which was really great because it was hard because it was like real orchestra music and I hadn't played very consistently in a while. But then my favorite thing is, I don't know if you've heard of this, but the University of Minnesota Law School puts on a musical every year. The organization's called TORT, which stands
I
for
don't know.
Theater.
I don't know
Yeah,
anything about it.
it stands for Theater of the Relatively Talentless.
Oh,
And yeah, we do like a parody musical. It's all written and performed by law students. The pit is all law students, the dancers, the singers, all law.
wow.
Yeah, and it's just so much fun because there's so many law students. Like we have people who were band directors, people who were professional musicians, people with their masters in music, people who were, professional actors or singers. So like you get some good quality music. But yeah, it got canceled this year, sadly. But
Like everything. I think the medical school might have an orchestra too. Is that
that
true?
makes sense. I don't know, but I know lots of
Oh, I
music
hear a dog.
med school too. Yep, that's the dog.
Yeah, well, if you ever need a ringer, let
Yeah,
me know. I'll play second.
could just be a whole pit orchestra bassoon.
That'd be the best.
That would be the
Yeah,
best. You
yeah,
wouldn't need any
yeah,
other
yeah,
instruments.
yeah. Well, I'm glad you do that outside. I'm glad you are able to do that because it's just so good.
Yeah,
Law is it's such a great intellectual stimulus for smart people like who like intellectual problems and things, but it's so heady. It really can just take you completely out of your heart and body. So what a
yeah.
good contrast to be able to play and laugh with people. And
Yeah, it's really great, and you get to know other law students in a different way. Because you have your friends, but then there's all these people who are in your classes that you don't really know, and you get to meet them
yeah,
out outside of that.
right.
And it's just funny because there's a lot of jokes about law school in the play.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, that only insiders get, but
yes,
yes, yes.
yeah. So my next question is, as someone who has the perspective of an arts lawyer and an artist, if you could change something about the arts industry, what would you do?
Oh, that's such a great question. I feel like the arts industry or the classical music industry.
Either one,
And
whichever
either one, I don't know.
you
I wish the classical music industry would open up. I wish um as I went through a journey of applying for things with orchestras, and I talked to board, and I've been on boards of what I would call traditional classical institutions and things, and they're they tend to be incestuous and hire from within, don't want to rock the boat, don't want to, and they're being forced to now because they're just not going to survive. But it just feels like if they could be a little more nimble with what they do. I mean, there's just so many interesting things going on in puppetry and theater and dance and collaborations that I just feel like um we're slow to do. The big the biggest thing I would change is it would be institutionalized like in Europe. And even there it's tight, of course, but it's recognized as part of um GDP, so to speak. Your wealth is um you know the depth of your cultural disciplines, practices. I mean, it's like, I know that the arts board and, it has concerns that the legislature, some people in the legislature, especially outstate, don't think the arts are frivolous or think they should, it's a luxury to fund them. But then they're often the same people who value the Super Bowl. And I want to say, well, who do you think is going to play music if nobody knows, no, there's no education in music? Who do you think is going to design the lighting? Who's going to design the building? Who's going to, that's all arts.
yeah,
And so for people to understand how much it's woven into us as humans, that it's not a frivolous thing. It's, and in times of trouble as they are now, that it's a healing thing, that art, you know um I have many stories. My kids are young adults, so they're not home, but friends with kids at home right now, the kids are on screens all day doing school and they can't really go anywhere. And I've heard stories of kids learning, getting better on guitar and drawing pictures and 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 it's healing for everybody. So uh I would just what would I do? How would I change it? Yeah, I would like it to be in a, understood for what it is, instead of something like frosting on the cake, or,
yeah.
although I would say frosting is necessary. Maybe,
Like
maybe
cute little dainty
decorations.
things
Yeah,
that
right, right, right. I could let go of that.
that would be a
But
kind of
not the,
cute, but they're
yeah,
not that
yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. An essential service, so to speak, in today's jargon.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's see. Here we go. Have you ever dealt with performance anxiety or imposter syndrome in bassoon, the law, or any area of your life? I
Let me
know.
see, what time is it?
Yeah, I know. I was
um,
gonna say law school. That's what it is.
oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, in bassoon, you know, yeah, I mean, and somebody recently asked me, I mean, I'm over 60, which is like a shock because I feel like I'm about 30. And what would you tell your younger self? That's a big question these days. And and I would say this to a young bassoonist or you're enough. You're enough. You can't be what you're not. And I think for those of us who self-select towards law, uh, classical music performance, that one high level performance at anything, we tend to never feel like we've done enough. And I think in a lot of ways I would have done a lot better if I just chillaxed a little bit, and law school was just like the same thing all over again. Although my first semester, like I say, my proudest accomplishment is that nobody died in my house, including the dog who ate a bottle of
Always
pills.
good.
Yeah, we got her to vomit so she didn't die. But I ended up with some kind of like a B minus or a C plus in every class. And when I got my report card, I remember right in front of my kids, I thought I have to drop out. I had failed. And I called the dean of students and he laughed. I said, I think I have to withdraw because I did so poorly. And I said, I've never gotten C's in my life. And he explained to me how in graduate school like this, the grading curve is
Yeah.
so flat that the difference between an A and a B plus can be 3 words or something, and that I was above average. That was slightly above, it's like, no, I got to call some people who got D's. They're the people I'm worried about. And, for that whole first year, I felt like I'd swallowed a rock and it was I couldn't, it was just, and yet I feel like I grew my brain, like I enhanced my nerve endings. I was doing something I'd never done before, something that was really scary. Um, and I think people really start aging when they stop doing things where they're beginners.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing really well towards the end. It's too late to do well in your ranking, but I knew I was never going to be in a firm or anything like that. So yes, performance anxiety and especially, young women. And like I see my daughter who is in medical school at the U, and what happens, this is just all a bunch of women talking here right now, I think, is that, just think about listening to your mom. Your mom's advice is not the one you need usually in your 20s, but you want to say you're doing great. You don't have to be you don't have to be the best, don't have to be the first. You can relax a little bit. And yeah, maybe it's just what we have to do as young, especially women. um I think it's different for you guys. I don't know how old you are, Rachel, by the way. And my daughter's name is Rachel, too, by the way.
Oh,
Spelled
wow.
exactly the same.
She's at the med school.
Yeah. She has a different last name, but yeah.
Okay.
Um, uh, but yeah, we're enough. We're enough. And we can do it differently. And what I love now is that I have networks of women and who I think would move a bus for me if I needed them to. I work alone in my law practice,
Mhm.
but these are friends and that grows into work and so on. And we support each other in the way that men always did. Um, my dad went on the golf course with his buddies, and now I don't know, we do various things, cocktails, knitting groups, my yoga group. These are my supporters, and they need my support. And it's not um phony support, like believing in each other. It's just
Yeah.
it's the cure to that, and banding together. I think women, especially in my mom's generation, but in mine, we were just, sort of culturalized to turn against each other, to compete in some way. And I think that's over. I think that's just gone. And I see role models like Elizabeth Warren, or who are just, I don't have time for that. It's
Yeah.
um,
I
and
agree.
there's room for men in there. I'm not saying that's a bad way, but it's just, I think my generation really started carving the way toward, not trying to look like a man in work, at work. Um, I mean, literally, when I started my career, there was Dress for Success. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. You should just Google it. And it was like women going to work in like suits with like these little, like, Boy Scout bow ties. And it was a kind of a uniform for the professional woman. So it was sort of like, look like a man, wear like, dress like a man, but in the,
Yeah, I know my mom's in business, and when she was younger, she wore heels like every single day. And now like no one wears
yeah,
heels. I
I,
can't imagine being in the courtroom on your feet all day in heels, like
no, exactly,
no.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. What are you hoping for, Rachel, for your legal
Oh
career?
my,
Are you still open, or do you have a
yeah,
plan?
I'm still pretty open. I've done a couple internships and externships now in criminal prosecution. Um, I've really enjoyed that. I really like trial practice and being in the courtroom. Um, I am hoping to get a judicial clerkship after law school, so I'm applying to those. Pretty open generally, some sort of public interest or government job. But I just think criminal law is just so interesting, and there's just this like, I love the energy of a courtroom. I think it's just, the stakes are so high in criminal law. It's a challenging area, but I think it's also a really rewarding, interesting area to work in. But at this point, like wherever my career takes me, not sure if I'll probably practice in Illinois or Minnesota. So
Yeah,
we have
gotcha.
the uniform bar exam now.
You do, or it's for multiple states?
Yeah, I think there's about 28 states signed on. So
Did Minnesota?
yes, Minnesota
Because,
and Illinois are both signed on, so I
oh,
can take one
nice.
exam
Oh, nice.
for both
When did
states.
that start?
A few years ago, Illinois just signed on. I think last summer was their
Mhm.
first summer. New York is signed on, but California is not.
Well,
That's kind of,
California is like another country,
yeah,
honestly.
they're weird.
Legally, they are really weird. You know, I also, it resonates with me. Your like, interest in being in the courtroom, and you know, every once in a while I feel like, oh, I should go see if I can get a public defender job or something. And I think it's like an opera. It's like a highly staged opera.
Yes.
And there's something about the way the criminal calendar works, that it's here and now, and then it's over. Like civil litigation just goes on forever, and it's all this writing, and you just do paperwork for a decade before you ever even see a courtroom.
Yeah.
And so, the criminal stuff is very like performance. It's very here and now. Think on your feet now, and know your scales and your arpeggios. You got, um, and the right when I got out of law school, a woman, an acquaintance who's a criminal attorney in town, asked me if I'd second chair, and I knew nothing. a murder trial, a
Oh my
double,
God.
she was the defense attorney, double murder and homicide, double homicide.
Oh my God.
And it was this guy who and he was guilty, and he's in, I will tell you, I'll jump to the chase, he's in Stillwater prison, thank God. um Stabbed this older couple many times and stole their checkbook basically. And it was like every cell in my body was tense the whole time. There's just so much. I'm sure that if I was more experienced, it wouldn't be as heightened like that.
Yeah.
But um, it was intense, and I was pretty glad when they found him guilty. And Amy Klobuchar was the DA then,
Oh,
the
on
county
the case.
attorney. No, well, she was
Oh,
everybody's
just at the
boss.
time,
Yeah,
she was the head of
yeah.
department.
I was on the defense side of that. The other thing I want to say to you is that it's kind of a funny thing, because I already in this conversation have thought about telling you about this woman I know. The first day of law school, I sat down and I was, I don't know, 38, 39, 40-ish, two kids, had a house, all that. And the person who sat next to me was 21 years old, fresh out of University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, maybe, I'm not sure where. And we are still very good friends. We became very good friends all through law school. And she is a criminal attorney. She has her own practice now. She was a public defender for a long time. And if I certainly will if you are
Yeah, that would
looking
be
to talk
great.
to people, she has made a career in criminal defense, but knows everybody.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, interested in that too. Yeah, that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
I've seen her in court. I don't know.
Her name is Krista Groshek.
Okay.
You might know her. She's this she's a dynamo. But anyway, it's an interesting thing, and happy to introduce you if you'd like that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
I guess I'll just ask one final question.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's just a kind of overview question. So, what is one thing that you hope others will gain from listening to you today? If you had to pick one thing to take away.
Well, first of all, I'm so happy to talk to you and be included in this project. So, thank you for that. And thank you for like being even slightly interested in what I can say, what I have to say. But, and honestly, it feels validating of, my life, which has been a not a really straight line, to where I am. I hope other women or people who listen to this know that there are a lot of ways up the mountain. And the biggest lesson I've learned is to be happy wherever I am on the mountain instead of, or accepting, maybe not happy, but accepting and accommodating to what it is. And it'll turn out. I mean, even this crazy mess we're in, the COVID thing, my practice is probably down 70% right now. But I just think it has to come back. I mean, life, it will go on. It'll look different, I think. But yeah, I hope people understand there are a lot of ways, a lot of ways up the mountain, and they're all valid, and there's no wrong turn. There's no wrong turn. And make friends along the way. Maybe that would be and if I can, have anything to offer, I would love to be of service.
Yeah, no, that was great. Gonna stop the recording here, but yeah, thank you for taking the time. I learned a ton from you today.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. I feel better for knowing you, and I can't wait to meet you in person. I can't believe you're in the Twin
Yes, in
Cities.
the Twin Cities.
And